I got this idea. I want to buy this piece of equipment. I think this is the way it's going to work. You know, here's my equipment, here's my personnel, here's my budget. This is what I want to do. And listen, if it works, I'm going to give you all the praise. If it doesn't work, I'm going to take all the blame. Most of the time, your supervisor is going to say, where do I sign? Right? So a lot of times, it's our own inability to sell, what we're trying to do.
Hey there, my name's Ashley Church.
And I'm Erin West.
We were once newly promoted crime scene and latent print supervisors on mutual struggle buses as we both simultaneously tried to navigate through the challenges within our forensic units.
Now we run a business where we create tools and resources that we wish we had had to make these transitions easier. We like to talk about the experiences we've had in the forensic field, the good, the bad, and the ugly, in the hopes to create awareness around these issues and move the needle forward to create positive change in the forensic community.
So if you're a forensic professional, regardless of your years of experience, who's not afraid to dive into real, raw, and sometimes uncomfortable topics, you're in the right place.
This is the Forensics Unfiltered podcast.
We've got another guest interview from our virtual summit for you. Last September, we hosted a free 4-day event titled Forensic Supervisor Success Summit, designed to help you thrive in a forensic supervisory position by setting goals, optimizing resources and skills, and getting organized. 768 registrants from 38 states and 14 countries were able to learn from 28 speakers and listen to 32 presentations. It was so wildly successful that we plan on hosting another summit this year. But while we're preparing for the big event, we wanted to give you something to listen to while you wait. So every month this summer, we'll be featuring a presentation from the 2022 Forensic Supervisor Success Summit. On this bonus episode, we'll be kicking things off with a guest interview with Sean Henderson, titled Creating an Outstanding Unit Culture. Sean established Evidence Management Institute in partnership with Tracker Products. Evidence Management Institute offers training classes, online certifications, as well as auditing and consulting services. And if you love this episode, we know you'll love the other presentations too. The presentations featured on Forensics Unfiltered make up only 15% of the entire summit. You can get instant access to replays for all 32 presentations in the All Access Pass on gapscience.teachable.com. We'll include all of the links in the show notes, but again, you can go to gapscience.teachable.com and click on the All Access Pass. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Hi guys, this is Erin West with Gap Science, and I'm very, very excited to have Lieutenant Steve Moser here with us today. He's currently with the Osceola County Sheriff's Office, also a business owner. He's going to tell you a little bit more about himself in just a second. But I was really excited to ask him to participate in this because since I have grown in my leadership and the amount of people that I've had to supervise, I often go to Steve for guidance, and he has given me wonderful nuggets of wisdom. He's always somebody that I can lean on when I need to flesh out ideas or talk about issues, or I just need some general leadership guidance. And I thought that he would be a great person to share some of those nuggets of wisdom with you guys today. So today we're going to talk about how to gain buy-in from your team and how to gain buy-in from your chain of command. But before we even dive into that topic, I'm going to give Steve just a minute to tell you a little bit about his background and what he's doing now.
All right, awesome. Well, good morning. And Erin, I'm very humbled by that introduction and just excited to be here. A little bit about my background. I've been at the Sheriff's Office for the last approximately 29 years. Spent majority of my career in investigations, and I have a deep respect for what you do in the forensics unit. And I'm here today. One of the topics we'll talk about, I'm sure, is about relationships. I'm here because of our relationship. Erin does an amazing job. Ashley, the co-owner, does an amazing job as well. And I have a mutual respect for what you do. And hopefully we can talk about something today that helps you, in your current position. Whenever we sign up for leadership, I'll just say there are normally three things. There's three reasons why we do it. One might be because you're broken, right? You're burned out. Two is to check a box. If I want to get promoted, I can put this down, I can check a box. Or three, I'm here because I want to get better. So I hope that you're here for number three, but usually it's normally 1, 2, or 3 is why you sign up for something like this, or you attend something like this.
Yes, we definitely hope you walk away from this summit with some useful nuggets that you can implement into your own leadership throughout your agency and at your unit. So diving right in, when we're talking about gaining buy-in from our teams and gaining buy-in from our chain of command, what do you think is the very first step of that process?
So if we want buy-in, it's about relationship. And relationship meaning that, I need to touch your heart before I can ask for your hand. And what that is just investing in your people. What do I mean by that? Just going by every morning and asking, hey, how you doing? Not how you doing and keep moving to check a box, but really stopping for a minute and just really finding out what's going on in the employee's life, right? Now they might be kind of private, or they may want to share, hey, tonight I need to get out here early because my kid plays soccer, whatever the case may be, but it's building that relationship. And I want to tell you that as a supervisor, the answer to your questions, I always say this, are normally at the boots on the ground, but they may not be forthcoming. You only get answers to the questions that you ask, making them feel part of the team, investing in them. And what does that mean? That means when I go to them, I'll give you an example. And we've all had a conversation like this. Somebody stops by and you're asking a question and, oh yeah, what was that, Erin?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So true.
Can you say that again, Erin? Sorry about that. Sorry about that. And it's time consuming. If I want to be a leader today, to be a motivator, it is exhausting, right? Because everybody's different. And so I need to find out what makes Erin tick, what makes Ashley tick, what makes Steven tick. And that's going to take time. Most of the time I get to do my end of the day stuff. I didn't say to you earlier, I'm not, anything I say today, even though I work at the sheriff's office, I'm not here representing the sheriff's office. But by the time I get to what I need to get to in my administrative duties, it's usually before 8 or after 5. The rest of that is building relationships, right? So I would say, people know whether you're genuine or not. Counterfeit money. We know that today, if we go to a store, they'll take a marker and they'll say, oh, this $20, I can see it's not counterfeit. But back in the day, they would train a bank teller blindfolded, and he or she would handle money all day long. And then they put a counterfeit bill in their hand and they could tell by the touch or the feel whether it was real or counterfeit. I want to tell you that the people around you know if you're real or you're counterfeit, right? They know by the touch. It's not so much what you say, but they'll never forget how you made them feel, right? And they know what's real and they know what's counterfeit. And you and I have had several conversations. If you want to coach talent, then you got to be talented, right? So what does that mean? Well, do you know forensics like a doctor knows medicine? Do you know forensics like an attorney knows the law? So if I want to be successful in the next 5 years, what could I do in the next 5 years to make me an expert? Whether I have buy-in at the top or not, what am I doing personally, right? What am I doing to grow? I don't know, maybe that's probably maybe a good start, and we can go from there. But, what am I doing to get better and not bitter, right? Because life is going to throw me in the. So what am I going to do? Am I going to get better or am I going to get bitter? All right. How am I going to take this and move on? Because it's 10% of what happens, 90% of how you respond to it. So our response. So I'm checking on the team and I'm checking on my supervisor. How many times, Erin, you're a supervisor, how many times has everybody walked into your office and said, good morning, Erin, or boss or supervisor, whatever they call you? They said, I just want to stop by and see what you needed. You probably fall out of your desk, right? You probably fall out of your chair, right? Because most of the time, people come with their wants and their needs, but they don't come to serve you, right? So when we talk about buy-in, we talk about selling things, that's part of it. If I walked into your office and said, Erin, do you need anything today? I just want to make sure you're okay and I want to serve you. wow, after you fell off your chair and got back up, you could move on.
It's true. Very true. So there were a couple of things in there that you said that I really, really loved. So one of the things was obviously building those connections with people are really important. And something that comes up a lot in our classes is that supervisors focus a lot on the issues of their staff, thinking that their staff are the problem and not realizing that a lot of times the issues originate with the supervisor. So where they're expressing their frustrations with staff, a lot of times it's the supervisor that's not doing something they should be doing, or they are doing something that they shouldn't be doing that's causing the staff to react a certain way. But the other thing I really love that you said is just giving your undevoted attention to people, because it is so hard as a supervisor. You are so incredibly busy. You have so much on your plate and not enough time in the day. And it's very hard when someone interrupts your flow to put down your phone or turn away from your computer and actually give them your undivided attention. But I do think that genuinely shows that you care and that relationship is important. I think that's a very valuable thing to do. I know you live that life, that your day is very crazy, but you are always very patient when people come and need to talk to you.
Yeah, there are those moments, right? Because we can't have a hangout session every day, right? We got to get some work done, right? So, there are some people that you can look at them today and you can say 5 years from now, they're still going to be on the same merry-go-round, right? Mm-hmm. The vampires that suck all the life out of you, So yes, we want to give them our undivided attention. And then at some point, we got to move past that and get back to work. We got a job to do. So it's very difficult. I don't even like to say balance or manage or anything else, because, like what Nick Holtz used to say at Notre Dame was the win mentality. What's important now? What's important now? And that employee coming at that moment may be what's important now, right? I need to put everything down. I need to listen to that, right? Because this is the most important thing. As I said before, and probably just my background in coaching is that for 20 years of coaching basketball, you're like, man, what works for this one doesn't work for that one. But what I did realize is that please and thank you go a long way, right? In the martial arts, Grandmaster Sell used to tell us, he'd call it the 4 F's. He'd say, be firm, fair, forgiving, and friendly. So what does it mean to be firm? Being firm means I hold people accountable, right? And the rules are the same for everybody. I'm fair. I look at things, I listen, right? Sometimes going into a meeting, as John Maxwell says, I have to write a big L at the top of the page to remind myself to listen to what's going on. Where do you sit in a meeting? That's another thing. When you get your team together, I never sit at the end of the table. I just don't do it. And I go in there with the mindset of saying, hey, I'm going to listen, and listening to everybody, right? And sometimes they're looking at me, I'm not saying anything. I'm just looking back at them just to hear what they have to say before, I give an opinion. Maybe why God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? So I can listen more, talk less, right? So I'm friendly. What does that mean? I'm approachable. How many times in your career you're like, I can't go talk to this guy, or I can't go talk to that girl because they're not approachable? The last thing I'm gonna say is forgiving. Man, in law enforcement, my God, people hold on to stuff.
Forever.
They're retired. They're still angry, right? You won't believe what they did to me, So and I always tell people that, you can't shake a hand with a closed fist. You got to learn to let go of some things, right? I got to learn to forgive. It's difficult. So I want to be firm. I want to be fair. I want to be friendly, and I want to be forgiving, right? I don't want to hold on to anything, because we want to be forgiven, right? When we make a mistake, I have a Diet Pepsi here, and the can is open, so I'm not going to shake it. But just imagine if this is normally how your day starts, or the night before, right? Somebody sends you an email, because everything's an email. It's all caps, and it really triggers
shouty caps.
Yeah, it really triggers a nerve inside of you, and you're like, when I get to work tomorrow, it's going to be on. Like when I get there, I'm going right to Steve, and I'll tell you, this is going to be on. Right. So the can is already shaking. Right. So then I get up that morning, I get ready to go. And my wife says to me, I need you to do this, this, and this before you go to work. And I go, but I have a meeting to go to, right? I'm shaking this can. I've got something I need to take care of. And then she says, well, you don't think my life's important? Now this can's about ready to explode, right? So I leave and maybe I got to take the kids to school that day, and you get in the line and they forget their book. You got to go back home. This can is still shaking. And what happens? By the time I get to work, here comes somebody that we supervise that gets on our nerves, maybe walking in sideways or whatever, what's up? What's up? And it's like, what's up? I'm gonna show you what's up. And I open the can, right? And the can makes a mess everywhere, right? And we go off. And really, because you said it earlier, and I just want to try to speak to that point, you said sometimes it's not the staff, sometimes it's you, because now I've came in, they don't realize I've been shaking this Coke can or this bottle, and I'm just waiting to open it, right? And so I open it, and just like in the natural, when we open it, it makes a mess everywhere, right? It spills on us, it spills on the table. Now you've made a mess, right? So now hopefully you go back and you apologize to that person. Hopefully, they're forgiving. They give you another shot.
So you talked a lot about building relationships is a huge part of gaining buy-in, and it is. Do you think that having a plan and having some direction of where you're going is also a key part of gaining buy-in?
Yes, you have to have a plan. What's the old saying is that no one plans to fail, they just fail to plan, right? So I bring the team in, I get the ideas from them, and now I need to take all the ideas, and now I'm taking that to present to the next level, right? So in succession planning or in planning, just in general to the admin, if you will, think about this. You always want to try to include your mission statement. So what is the mission statement there for the agency? What is the vision for the agency? And if I can always think about this, whatever I'm doing, it's the community first, agency second, and the employee last. Now that kind of sounds bad because that's not the way I manage, but that's the way I have to write things and propose things to the person above me. We talked about before, I got to know where I'm at. If I pick up the phone and I want to go to Brevard County Zoo, the first thing the GPS is going to ask me is, where am I at? So you got to know where you're at, right? Because if I don't know where I'm at, I don't know where I'm going. So first I got to see where I'm at. This is where I want to go, and these are the steps I want to get there, right? So when I present something to somebody above me, it's always got to be, somehow we got to tie the mission statement in. We got to tie the vision in, right? And then we got to tie the community in. This is going to make us better. When you start talking about your solvability rates are going up, because I need to do the scene this way, right? We always say it, you get one chance at a scene, right? So we'll go back to that. You can't argue results. And some of the things that people will say is they'll say, oh man, this is Erin, Ashley, this is great training. But this is never going to work, right? This is never going to work where I work at. When I take this back, oh my God. So you already go back defeated.
Yeah.
So you act defeated. So you don't realize what's going on in the subconscious mind. I don't have time to unpack all of that. But when this is buried in your subconscious, that it's never going to work, you act like it's never going to work. One of the other things is this. If I'm taking something to a supervisor, Erin, if you're my supervisor, I come to you and I say, Erin, first of all, I ask you, do you need anything, right? And you're like, oh my God, this guy is incredible, right? And then I say to you, Erin, I got this idea. I want to buy this piece of equipment. I think this is the way it's going to work. Here's my equipment. Here's my personnel. Here's my budget. This is what I want to do. And listen, if it works, I'm going to give you all the praise. If it doesn't work, I'm going to take all the blame. Most of the time, your supervisor is going to say, where do I sign? Right? So a lot of times it's our own inability to sell, what we're trying to do. So it's kind of like Miranda in an interview. Some detectives are like, oh, I can't read Miranda. They're going to ask for an attorney, So what do? They walk in, they're scared, they're anxious. So they blotch it all up, right? Instead of just going in there and saying, hey, blah, blah, you get Miranda, you've seen it on TV, and we just move on, right? Same thing in our mindset, whatever we're trying to sell, if we act anxious or we lack confidence or we don't really believe in it or we think you're going to deny it, because that's normally what you're going to hear.
That's so true. I completely agree with that stuff. And I've been a supervisor at many different agencies throughout my career. And a lot of the supervisors that we have come to the class run into the same things that I used to run into when I was much more fresh in my career, where they would ask for something, they would be told no, and they'd be like, well, they're never going to buy that thing for me. And I did learn over the years that if I wanted something for my team, if it was important for my team, then I had to justify it in a way that mattered to the agency. And I couldn't just say, we're really short staffed, we're drowning in here, we need help, because everybody's short staffed and everybody's drowning in work. I really had to think about, why would the agency care? How is this going to impact cases? How is this going to impact our ability to prosecute? How is this going to impact the evidence? And use those as reasons to justify why we needed more people, more equipment, more training, whatever, as opposed to just going up to my chain of command and being like, I need these things, which I think so many people do. They go there and say, I need this, I want this, but they're not backing it up with a valid reason why the agency should care about those needs. So let's say you do work at a department, you have, tried to get the buy-in of your team, your chain of command, and it just seems like that support is just never going to come. So what do you do if that's your situation?
Yeah, well, first, let me just tell you that, you would hope that that is not common. But if you do face that, there's an old saying out there called embrace the suck, right?
Yes.
Sometimes it's going to suck. And you just got to work through it, right? And it goes back again to looking inside, looking inside and saying, okay, what could I do, right? And how does that happen? That happens daily. You mentioned earlier about budgets. One thing I've learned at our department is that forensics has no problem putting in for stuff, right? I mean, it's,
I will ask for all the things.
Yeah, exactly. Because you and I both know that if you need one thing, you better ask for 20, right?
Yes.
So everything's going to get cut out, right? But looking inside and say, okay, I may not get that support, but I'm going to go back again, looking inside and saying, what am I doing to develop me? People say, oh, I can't afford training. One of the first things you get cut in an agency is training, right? But I would ask you, what do you listen to every day?
Yeah.
Your commute to work, it's an hour, maybe sometimes 30 minutes, an hour, whatever. What are you listening to? What are you reading? Because an hour a day equals 9 40-hour weeks of training. And let that sink in for a minute. 9 40-hour weeks of training, an hour a day. So what are you reading? What are you listening to?
They say that leaders are readers. You guys should be reading for
That's
sure.
Right. But you know what they also say is that great leaders are great followers, right? So how do I act, right? So sometimes, we may have a team member that acts a little crazy, but then are they just seeing the behavior that we're doing, right? When we interact with somebody, we act crazy. So now they act crazy with us because they think that's acceptable. It's more about what people see, how you do things, right? Everybody's watching, right? So sometimes they're looking at that interaction, how we act with supervision, right? And if we're disrespectful, then they may say, well, I guess that's acceptable because they're disrespectful, right? Or whatever the case may be. But I'm telling you that if you take anything away from today, it comes from me, right? It's got to be relational. I got to look inside first. Could I be the problem? When this happened to me, 2011, when I was in the homicide unit, and I said, hey, I'm frustrated at work. I'm frustrated at home. I'm frustrated at church. Wow, what's the common denominator in all three of those things? This guy, right? Yeah. So it wasn't everybody else that had a problem. That's why I always say, look in first. How much of this do I own? Now in being responsible for training, if somebody makes a mistake, then I say to myself, how much does the agency own? How much do I own, right? Did we prepare this individual for this day? And we all know, whether you watch football or not, Tom Brady, he's a pretty good dude, right? He's a pretty good football player. But he doesn't get it right 100% of the time. He makes mistakes. He throws an interception. Nobody cares. We make a mistake, it's the end of the world, right? Because we're expected to be perfect. So how much training are we getting and how much training are we doing? And if you're not getting it, you got to do it on your own. And if somebody doesn't support you, you got to keep it moving.
Yeah. I think that we as supervisors have a responsibility for taking care of that and taking care of the growth of ourselves and our team, even if it isn't supported by the agency, even if we don't have the funding. Lots of ways to find free resources that you can use to, keep your team up to date with things. Even other agencies will do free trainings. But all of that being said, would you also agree that when we're talking about lack of support, that we should really think about all of this as a long game, not a short game, with the kind of knowledge and understanding of how frequently, like, chain of command and sheriffs and, police chiefs and all of that changes so often that it could just be a matter of just waiting it out until, the turnover or whatever changes are bound to happen, and then trying again.
As you said, I'm in this for the long game. Simon Sinek talks about that we're playing an infinite game, right? This is not 9 innings in a baseball game. It's not 4 quarters in a football game. I'm playing this is an infinite game. But I can tell you this, if I become an expert in my field, if I study everything for the next 5 years and I become an expert, I will write my own ticket. But you got to do what everybody else is not willing to do, right?
Yeah.
You got to read, you got to study, you got to go to these classes, you got to go to do all these things, because I'm telling you, when you become an expert, you will write your own ticket. Now, the challenge becomes when you have constant change at the top, right? When there's no stability. Obviously, there's nice when there's stability there. People have their feet under them. The top is stable, right? That makes things a lot easier. But if that's not the case, I need to just keep growing, right? And because this is long term, right?
Yeah.
And you and I both know that you and Ashley travel around. You can be in our county talking to one of our people, and I'm not gonna say this happens all the time, but they're like, yeah, right? Because we all know that a prophet has no honor in his homeland. But we could go to maybe Seminole County or maybe Brevard or Volusia, and all of a sudden they go, man, this Erin chick, man, you got to hear her. She's unbelievable. I mean, you're saying the same thing, right?
Yeah.
But you've just traveled a couple other counties, and they're like, man, this is incredible, right? So again, it's going to come back to that. Look, I'm here for the long haul, and that's knowing your why. All of these things are so important that it doesn't matter who's above me. It doesn't matter who's beneath me, right? And what's that going to happen? You're going to begin to excel.
Yeah.
No matter what's above you. Listen, one thing I know is that I can recognize talent, but if I want talent, I better be talented. I can't think I'm gonna coach at the YMCA one day and I'm coaching football at University of Alabama the next day. Probably not gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm not at that level yet. So I need to keep getting to that level. And I'm telling you right now, when you get to that level, you write your own ticket.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that, because the more that you can increase the talent of your unit, yourself and your unit, and the more you can increase their value, the more support you will get for their needs. If they're providing a lot of value to the investigations, a lot of value in prosecution, a lot of value to the agency, then the agency is a lot more supportive of pouring money into those departments to make them even better. So I do think if you are finding yourself at a department where you're like, they don't give us anything, they won't give me staff, they won't give me equipment, they won't send me to training, what are you providing to the agency first? What can you do to improve your skills and improve your value? And then they will pour more into you from that point. At least that's how I feel it's worked for us. The more value we provide, the more they will invest in us.
Yeah, 100%. And it goes back to the old saying that a divided house can't stand. Well, we show up on a scene and we're more divided than we are together. It's a problem. We both bring an expertise to the table, right? So we've got to value each other and say, okay, Erin, you bring something to the table, right? So whether we had buy-in or not, you got to have unity. I mean, there's a blessing. The book tells us there's a blessing on unity, and you're going to go far. You're going to go far when you're united. But when you're, oh my God, it just doesn't work. I may not like you. I may not want to break bread with you, but I need to respect what you bring to the table. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I respect your background. I respect your knowledge. And together, we're going to solve this homicide, right? In front of my supervisor, when somebody messes up, I say, I'm sorry. Got to be my fault. I must not explain something or whatever, right? Because you got other people, they're just like this. They're pointing the fingers at they did it, Defend your team. Defend your team. Stand for your team, right? So again, that brings that unity. You and I know of working together. If CID or the detectives complained about something, I didn't just go, oh yeah, forensics sucks. Erin, get in here. No.
Yeah.
Go back and you look at it. But what does that take, Erin? It takes time. Right?
Oh, yeah.
And I'll be successful. It takes time. And all of a sudden they go, wait a minute. I know that he's going to look at everything, right? So that comes back to one of the 4 F's, right? He's going to be fair.
Yeah.
He's going to be fair. But if I messed up, he's going to be firm. But if I messed up, he's going to be forgiving.
And I actually think that's just a great thing to know. I mean, that was one of the first experiences I had with you. And that really, for me, that encouraged a lot of respect on my part, because just like he's saying, it happens so often that we get told something and we're immediately so fired up about it. We're going to rip into somebody about it. And he took the time his people came to him and complained about forensics. And he took the time to look into it to see, like, was that accurate, And when he looked into it, he was like, everything was fine, and he totally calmed down the situation where it could have been very confrontational. And I really appreciated and valued that. And that's a hard thing to do, because it's human nature for us to hear something and get very worked up about it and just like dive into a fight without really digging into the background of stuff. That's a great skill to have as a supervisor, for sure.
You and I have talked about it, and it came from John Maxwell that you hope that everybody, your leadership team, I see them with a gallon of gas and a gallon of water, right?
Yes.
So somebody comes to you with a problem, you're hoping they use the water, because this just started out like we were just roasting marshmallows, and now all of a sudden the whole forest is on fire, right? There's a fire on it, because there's just that human nature that negative news travels faster, gossip. Who doesn't like some good gossip, right? Especially around the sheriff's office. My God, everybody, right? That's the problem. So instead of saying, hold on a second, let me get the story, right? Let me get both sides of it before we go crazy, right? So I'm gonna put some water on this, right? And I'm gonna go find out what happened before I set the building on fire, right? So
true. If you guys have ever heard me say that in class, this is the man where that came from. As I use that in class regularly now. Do you bring a bucket of water or do you bring a bucket of gas? He was the first person I ever heard say that. So we talked at length about building relationships with your team, having a plan, learning to kind of change the way that you communicate your needs and stuff like that. And for a brand new supervisor coming in, they have a brand new unit, maybe not a new unit, but a new vision, a new leader. It seems in that place, sometimes it's easier to get people on board for where you're going. But let's say you're not a new supervisor. This unit's been around for a minute. They are completely stagnant, and you are dragging along a bunch of anchors, and you're trying to get them on board to make change, make progress, whatever. How do we go about doing that when we have a unit that's been in place for a long time? Maybe you've been the leader of that unit for a long time and it's just not going anywhere.
Yeah, well, we know that ultimately that we have to set an expectation, right? So you can't inspect what you don't expect, right? So I think sometimes, whether you're new or you're seasoned, sometimes people fail to set the expectation, right? So these are my expectations, right? And now everybody's going to be sitting back. Some of the team might be, well, I don't have to follow the rules because Susie doesn't follow the rules, right? Susie comes in late, so why do I need to be on time, right? So every decision that you are making, people are watching. And some people think, well, no decision is a good decision. It's probably the worst decision, right? Because you're not dealing with it. So I got to come in and I say, hey, this is the way the train is going, right? But don't write a check that you can't cash. That's the other problem, right? So when I come in, I say, this is the way it's going, right? This is the way the bus is moving. Pretty simple for me. I tell them, don't do stupid stuff, right? I spent some of my career in internal affairs, and I realized that sometimes the lack thereof of supervision, right? Because some supervisors are travel agents. They send people where they've never gone instead of being a tour guide. And what does it take to be a tour guide? And you take them and show them how to do it, right? So when I come in, it's setting the standard, and then you got to hold people to it, And at the end of the day, listen, I've had to move some people. It's not easy. It's tough. But you got to rip the Band-Aid off. And we all know you better have what? You better have the documentation, right? Because I don't know how many times that supervisors will come to complain to me as an administrator in the internal affairs unit. I'd go, where's your notes? And they're like, what? Well, this is what they did. No, where's your notes? Where's the notes that show me? Because we got to be able to, we got to give a person a chance to improve, right? So we've done all this, and sometimes maybe we dance around it too long. And again, you may not have the support from above, but you got to continue to document. I just think saying, hey, this is the way we're going, and I'm going to support you in this. These are the reasons why I believe this. And if there's any mixed feelings or something you don't agree with, then ask. But you got to give them the ability to ask the question without ripping their head off, right? But you got to set the standard. These are the standards. Because let me say this, Erin, when somebody puts in for a position, you and I have sat on boards, right? We forget why we signed up. So an old supervisor or an old employee may want to every once in a while go back and pull their personnel file and read that essay they wrote, right? 29 years. I went back and read mine after about 15, and I was like, who wrote this essay? When you apply at the sheriff's office or you apply, and you're like, I want to save the world. I'm Superman. I'm Jesus Jr. I'm gonna save everybody, right? And all of a sudden, 10 years later, you go back and you're like, who wrote that? Because now we're so cynical, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's lying, and everybody hates us, and the world sucks, and I hate everybody. And that's that student that sits in your class that faces the wall, right? I mean, we hire the nicest people in the community, and then we turn them into grumpy old men and women if they don't deal with these things, right? They get crusty, right?
Yeah.
Like, man, it's a bright and shining star. My God, what happened? Now that they're grumpy old man you don't want to run into, right? So again, set the expectation, right? And if you don't meet the expectation, there's got to be a consequence. I just sat on a board for a supervisor at our agency. And what they all say, man, what do you struggle with? I don't want to have that tough. Nobody wants to have the tough conversation. I get it, right? Because what do they say? They always say, oh, I don't want to be the bad guy. No, you're doing your job.
Yeah.
And because other people haven't. How many of you taken over a unit and this person has sucked since day one, right? But they got these bright, shining, glowing evaluations, and you're like, where did that come from, right? And the person comes to you and goes, I'm just burned out. I was like, well, for you to be burned out when you have to been on fire, like you've done nothing here. How could you be burned out? You've never been on fire, right? So you and I think we share so much because, sometimes you adopt something like that and you read an evaluation and this person sounds like Mother Teresa, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh my God, where do they get this from? Right.
Yeah.
So
and some of you probably have that right now where you have adopted, maybe half your unit is on board with where you're going, and you have that one or two that's completely stopping that progression of the unit. And I think that, you mentioned expectations and having consequences and all of that. It doesn't matter when that starts. Like if you've been over that unit for 10 years and you've never set expectations and you've never had a plan, you can do that now. And it's going to be a hard change for them to adjust to, but you can go home and think about like, what are my expectations of my team, and actually deliver that to them. And deliver them like, this is the plan, this is where we're going, and start from this point forward with those expectations. So, and then you have told me this before, but I definitely want you to share this with them. You talked a little bit about sometimes people have to leave the team, and I myself have done that, and it's personally, I think it's really, really difficult. I take no pleasure in doing that whatsoever. It's incredibly uncomfortable to remove people from the team that are not fitting the needs of the team. But as the supervisor, it's our priority to keep the team and the vision in our sights and be allowing team members onto that bus that should be on the bus and letting the people off the bus that shouldn't be there. So, and you had a story that I was hoping you would share.
This comes from Dr. Samuel Chan. He's a world-renowned leader. And what he said is, and I went there as a pastor to sit there, 10,000 of us, and he asked some very serious questions, and he said, we all have boxes, right? And we have our chain of command, our flow chart, if you will. So sometimes we take a box over here that's a problem and we move it over here, right? And my question to you is, if it's a cancer here, what is it going to be over here? It's still going to be a cancer, right?
Yeah.
Moving the cancer is like rearranging the furniture on the Titanic, right? That's that mindset. So everybody knows who needs to go, but you just got to be willing to do it. Here's the problem, right? If I went to you and you were a doctor, I said, Erin, I got cancer in my fingertip. And you said, no problem, Steven, we can do the surgery tomorrow. And I go, nah, I think I'll wait. I think I'll wait a year. And you look at me like, you got cancer in your fingertip? You want to wait a year? So now in that year, the cancer has went from my fingertip. Now it consumes my whole body. You may be supervising a unit that's full of cancer because you didn't want to cut the fingertip off. Now what happens? We have a surgery and I come out of surgery and now the finger down to the joint, a little bit further is missing. I say, man, doc, I thought you said the fingertip. He said, we had to remove some good tissue to make sure all the bad was gone. So sometimes as a leader, we're thinking if I cut the fingertip off, I might lose a good one with it, right? And that may happen. But would you rather have cancer in your fingertip and be gone, or have cancer in your entire body the longer you wait, right? And I'm telling you right now, if you don't think it's your agency, wherever you work at, that one problem child, everybody's like, this person needs to go, you have lost your mind. Now they're sitting around there waiting to see if you're going to fulfill the expectation. This was the standard that you set, right? We're not going to tolerate this. And they're like, I guess Susie didn't get the memo, because Susie just does whatever she wants, right? So now this is a distraction. This is a disruption, and somebody might get mad, or somebody might, in the beginning, people will get upset. But over time heals all wounds, right? And that's not being mean, hopefully, because there are some people who are just being vindictive, right? I mean, you could work for somebody that just doesn't like you, or you don't like them. Doesn't mean they're not a good supervisor. Doesn't mean you're not a good tech. You just don't mix. I mean, you need to go somewhere else. I learned that in K9. We'd have a great dog and a great handler, but the dog didn't like the handler didn't like the dog. Put the dog with another handler, give that handler another dog, both teams are successful. Yeah. So sometimes it's that, right? Just the personality is like this, we just can't overcome this. And sometimes, let me say this, sometimes when you're asking for something, you've been in a position for 10 years, they're not so frustrated with what you're asking for. They're just tired of Steven. They're tired of hearing me say it. So now I move out of the way, a new supervisor comes in 6 months, they get what I couldn't get done in 10 years because they were just tired of me. Does that make sense? Sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Anyway, so if there's anybody on your team today that if you open a second location, is there anybody you wouldn't take with you? And if the answer is yes, then you got to ask yourself, then why are they with you now?
Those are the big questions. And that means you got to do the work that's required to make your team the appropriate team that it should be. So, and I will say, like I said earlier, from personal experience, that is not fun. It is not a fun process, but if you're looking out for what's best for your team and your unit in the long run, you'll do what needs to be done to make sure that you have the best players on that team. So this has been amazing. Before we log out, do you have any last words of wisdom that you want to share with everyone that came today to learn a little bit about gaining buy-in?
Yeah. The last thing is, that's why I say today, if you want to be a supervisor, like, are you sure you want to be a supervisor?
Yeah. I think one of the things I didn't realize, and this is a little off topic, but when I became a supervisor, I didn't realize how much of the job was just dealing with people. And I think a lot of people step into the role because they're the best at what they're already doing. And they're like, well, I'm the best, so I was chosen because I'm the best. And then they become a supervisor and they want to keep doing all those tasks they were doing before, and they don't manage the people. But actually, most of our job is just managing the people and doing the people things.
Yes. as John Maxwell said, what do you love the best about your job? You ask somebody, a CEO, the people. What do you like the least? The people.
Yeah.
You're right. It's the people business. And we say, oh, we don't care. We care. You can say you don't care, but we care, right? There's a certain amount of that. But at the end of the day, we have to say, if we break bread or we build a relationship, all of this sounds good. This training y'all are doing is phenomenal until you go to try and apply it. Oh God, right?
Yeah.
Hey, I went to this seminar, Gap Science. It was great. I'd like to sit down and share my expectations with you. And the team goes, oh, great. This is great. Yeah, sure.
You're like, but Gap Science told me to.
Yeah.
They told me I
and
had to.
You're like, man, on the training, it sounded so easy. Man, all the speakers, I know they're all going to do a phenomenal job. And I don't say that lightly. You guys have put together a great training. And it's going to sound so easy. And you're going to come back, you're going to be fired up. I would just tell you, don't try to change everything in a day. We work with young people today, and they just start in law enforcement. And they've been there 3 months, and they go, I just want to make a difference. I'm like, you've been here 3 months. You don't realize how good you are until later on. Patience. We don't have patience. We pace in front of a microwave. Things are not fast enough. You got to tell the young people, slow down. You are making a difference, but you've been here 5 minutes. It's going to take time. You get me going. I could keep going.
I know. We could talk about these things all day, but all this content was really amazing. We really hope you guys heard some things in here that you can go back and apply and use to, kind of adjust some of your processes and help you guys get the support you need in your units. If you want to ask Steve any questions or reach out to him or want any coaching or leadership advice, I'm sure he has endless nuggets to provide. He's been a great resource for me in my career as well. We will drop his email for you to contact him. And we thank you guys so much for attending today and hope you have a wonderful rest of your summit. Bye.
All right, we hope you enjoyed this bonus episode of the Forensics Unfiltered podcast. Just a reminder, if you want instant access to this guest interview and over 30 more presentations like it, get the all-access pass at gapscience.teachable.com. The link is waiting for you in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here and listening to Forensics Unfiltered. If you liked this episode, would you do us a favor and leave a review letting us know specifically what you liked about this topic? It will only take a minute, but it will really help us plan future episodes so we can bring you more topics that you want to listen to. We'll be sure to provide any links from today's episode in our show notes on our website. Head to www.gapscience.com. Until next time, stay safe out there.